Hi folks, John Cordisco back again. Well, as you probably already know, the first 7 games of the World Chess Championship have been drawn. I haven't shown any of them. I probably will at a later date, but they were all drawn. Some of them are really long, tough fights. But those of you that don't know yet, I'm not going to say who won. Game 8, we finally have a winner. As white, current world champion from Norway, Magnus Carlsen, and as black, Sergei Karjakin, formerly from the Ukraine, now from Russia. We finally have a winning game, a decisive game. Let's get to it. Carlsen is white. Karjakin is black. We're just going to go through it here a little bit. It's going to be a Queen's Indian, b3, bishop e7, castles, bishop b2, pretty much standard stuff. I'm going to kind of go through the opening quickly here. Bishop takes, knight, bishop b7. That's basic your classical variation of the Queen's Indian. Don't know a lot about it. It's very popular at the higher level. So let's just stop here, take a breath, and look at the position. I think it's about even. The computer off screen bears it out. Minute advantage, if any, for white. It's just a good opening. Queen. And finally, Karjakin develops his last minor piece. Okay, what do you do from here? This is the part of the game where I have the hardest time. Trying to formulate a plan. Of course, these guys don't have to do that, of course, but... Well, right away, Magnus decides to go right after Karjakin's center. Pawn takes. We can go back and forth on this, I guess, but... Knight takes, bishop takes. Knight takes is the best. Probably you and I would probably play bishop takes, but knight takes is the very best. You know, hitting some key squares here in black's camp. Queen e7. a3, interesting. I think a lot of us would have played instead one of our rooks over. But it is the top move in the computer now. They're all very close. Rook fd1, rook ac1, and a3. Carlsen decides to go a3, and I have no doubt they're still in their preparation for this. It does hold this key square here. In case the bishop sneaks over. a5, knight d4. What to do? And naturally, Karjakin develops one of his rooks. Magnus does the same, and then the other rook comes into play, and Magnus does the same. So, all the pieces are developed. The rooks are in the center of the board. All the minor pieces are developed. Both kings are castled. Now it's time to play. Interesting move here. Not one of the choices of the computer. Knight to e4 was the choice on the computer for black. Decided to go knight to f8. Interesting. He wants to keep this open. Queen e1. Now the knight goes to g6. That was one of the reasons why I moved that knight back. Not just to open up the file, but get that knight in a better spot. Magnus decides he wants that rook. They'll protect his knight, at least keep his rook on the open file, put the bishop back until he gets some good later. Knight g4. Now, I got to tell you, the last few moves, I'm not sure what Magnus is thinking. He's not behind by any means. There's a tiny advantage for black, but it looks like he's not really doing that well. Magnus... don't get me wrong when I say this. Magnus is a total expert and has tons of preparation and all kinds of openings. But Magnus is the kind of player, white or black, will get you through the opening, towards the middle game, get an even position, does outplay his opponent. I think that's his tactic here as well. Knight to b5, hitting some key squares here. Here and here. and even back here if he had to. Bishop b6, go after the knight right away. a4. I don't know if I'd like that very much, to tell you the truth. The computer election is the best move. I get this thing about doubled pawns. I'm afraid that after bishop takes, pawn takes. Bishop d5, of course, he didn't take it because he's playing the world championship and I'm not. This is where it gets complicated, at least it does for me. There's so many pieces on the board that it's almost maddening to try to figure out the variations. And we're on move 20. Now, this is where I think Karjakin took a long time going bishop d5. Looking on my computer here, he took 22 minutes for this move. Long time. Magnus took almost 10 minutes to go bishop d4. So Karjakin decides to trade down a little bit. Rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes, rook takes. This I was very surprised. I watched this live earlier. If you go on chess24.com, they have their own YouTube channel as well. You'll see the commentary. I believe today was Jan Gustafsson. I'm trying to remember who was with him. Peter Fiddler, I believe. I don't remember. And it looked really, really boring. We thought to ourselves, here we go, another draw. The 8 in a row. Snooze fest. As chess fans, we like blood. But he took with a pawn, which I was really surprised. Knight f6. Karjakin's getting his knights back into play. Queen to d2. Forcing either the trade or move the rook. He decides to move the rook instead. g3. Chance for his bishop to get out. Plus the fact give his king some luft. Knight e5. Good spot for that knight for Karjakin. Bishop g2. Just like he thought. h6, do the same thing for Karjakin. Decides to get some luft to his king before it gets to be too late. And Magnus goes for it, f4. Starting to push his pawns up, driving the knight back. This was a surprising move, but it really wasn't after I thought about it. Knight to a7. He's trying to get that knight into a decent spot. Goes queen to a3, gets right in the middle of his camp here. What to do, what to do. Magnus just moves his knight to hit the rook. The rook has to move. h3, that was a little surprising. That really, really shocked me. I thought he'd take the rook on d7. That way he gets two pieces for the rook. But he decided against it and went h3 instead. And slowly but surely, I think Magnus is losing the position. He's probably just trying to keep the knight out. If he had taken rook on d7, after knight takes, queen takes check. King has to go to f1. He probably didn't want to get into that nonsense. So he went h3, knight c5. King decides to get out of dodge. Knight takes a4. Rook to d8, forcing the trade. Of course, he moves the pawn instead. Now he goes queen to d4. And that threatens, of course, rook takes, king takes, and he loses a piece. So he moves the king up. Now, he puts himself in a pin and guards at the same time. Very unusual. It's also, if you notice as well, which I didn't really notice at the beginning, this queen is guarding the rook, so that knight isn't going to be taken. c5. Big question mark. I'm looking on the computer off screen. They actually gave Magnus a question mark. Very unusual for Magnus. Very unusual. Rook to d7 maybe. Remember, the knight can't take as his pinned. Rook d6. Knight e5 I like a lot. Probably that I would have done. It's a very human move. Decides to go c5 instead. And now I think Magnus is in trouble. A lot of trouble. Rook takes, knight takes, knight takes. Black's up 2 pawns. But Black's king's in a lot of trouble. Queen to d6. Now I can see why Magnus did this. Now the queen trade. What do you do? What do you do? Knight takes e6 check. F takes. Queen e7 check. Now he gets the knight back. We're back to even in score. I think that's where Karjakin messed up and let him off the hook. Let's go back here a little bit. Black was sitting really well. I think Queen a4 for Black. And Black wins. But after you go through this series here, when he gets his piece back, it's back to even. So Karjakin missed an opportunity. Now Queen takes f6 was move 40. Maybe he was in time trouble. Probably more than likely. And Karjakin went a4. e4 by the world champion. Queen to d7. Still an even game. Queen takes check. Queen comes over. Still no trade from Magnus. He wants to keep the queens on the board. Of course, he desperately wants to take them off. You just can't trade now with those passed pawns Black has. Queen to d8. f5. Try to get some open ground here. Get a passed pawn. Get on his king. a3. F takes. King to g7. What to do, what to do. e7. Here comes Magnus. Queen takes. Queen takes. Not a very good sequence for Magnus. Because now what happens is after knight to d3, Queen a5, Queen c5. Can't trade queens. Goes after the knight. Knight e5. Queen e6. h5 for Karjakin. I mean, we're on the edge here. And this is where I think Magnus blows it. Could have been in time troubles. Move 52. Queen a6. Yeah, granted, queen endings are a nightmare to figure out. But this move here, I don't know where he got it from. And just like that, it's over. A major blunder from the world champion. To give you an idea, before this, it was a little over a point advantage for Black. After h4, it's an almost 7-point advantage for Black. a2. And that's where it ends. Magnus, current world champion, loses the first game, game 8. It was 3.5 prior to this game. Now it's 4.5, 3.5. Advantage to Karjakin. Unbelievable. Don't know what happened to Magnus. Give you an idea what would have happened. Queen has to take. Knight checks. King to h3. Queen to g1. And it's over. Absolutely over. Just amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Give you an idea, if the bishop had moved, knight just goes here, checks, and queen has to take, and he loses the queen. Anyway, folks, hell of a game. Tough break for Magnus at the end. So we'll move on. Maybe Magnus can make a comeback and make a match of it. And as I always say, folks, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.